right, definers, welcome back to Sustainability Defined, where Scott and I are here defining sustainability one concept and one bad joke at a time. This is an update and a re-release of episode 21 on water infrastructure, which, Scott, we released way back in April of 2017. How bright-eyed we were back then, but we think this is a super interesting topic with all kinds of cool stuff to update our definers on, right?
Totally. I mean, I think, Jay, when we were looking back at what episodes to replay and update, this one just totally stuck out, given the recent news.
Absolutely. And any chance we can to just broadcast Will Sarni, I think we would take it, you know?
He's a good dude. All right, Jay. So let's first talk about some of the things we learned from looking at a source that wasn't in our original episode. So this is the drinking water section of the American Society of Civil Engineers report card for America's infrastructure. So ASCE gave U.S. drinking water a C- in its 2021 report card. Jay, do you ever recall getting a C-?
Fortunately, no, Scott. You?
I don't think so. That's a pretty rough grade.
Yeah, it's a real like confidence check, isn't it?
But at the same time, you did just pass.
So
Barely. So,
I love the rose-colored glasses you have on, Scott.
All right, so some interesting basic facts from here, Jay. So our nation's drinking water infrastructure system is made up of 2.2 million miles of underground pipes. And I love this stat because I remember looking for this when we were doing our original episode, because in the original episode, we have something kind of like this. We say that there's 1.2 million miles of water mains in the U.S. So water mains are just the pipes going from the purification plant to customer systems. And we said that 1.2 million miles is 26 miles of water mains for every mile of interstate highway, which blows your mind because you're like, wow, we have a lot of interstate highway, but that tells you how many pipes there are. But that was just water mains. So you add 1 million miles to that, and you get the total, 2.2 million.
Scott, that is a crazy number, and literally we see none of them walking around. You know?
We're off to a strong start here, Jay.
All right, so tapping back into the things we touched on in our last episode that we're going to update here. We talked about water main breaks. Here are some additional stats. There is a water main break every 2 minutes, and an estimated 6 billion gallons of treated water lost each day in the U.S. That is enough to fill over 9,000 swimming pools.
Every day.
Crazy. Additionally, people use about 82 gallons of water per person per day here in the U.S. Nearly half of water utilities report declining or flat total water sales in the past 10 years, largely due to efficiency improvements. I thought that was an awesome stat. Well done, Scott.
Yeah.
On top of that, about 39 billion gallons of water a day are withdrawn from surface water or groundwater sources for public supply. Public supply use represents about 12% of total freshwater withdrawal. So again, just some stats to help you keep this on perspective.
Right. And I think most of the rest, Jay, is agriculture. And you're reading now as there's a drought in the West about farmers saying we can't grow what we used to grow because we don't have the water availability. So anyway, the report card provides some new and additional details in problems with our water infrastructure. First, much of the current drinking water workforce is expected to retire in the coming decade. Between 2016 and 2026, an estimated 10.6% of water sector workers will retire or transfer each year, with some utilities expecting as much as half of their staff to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. So, Jay, that could certainly be a ripe area for definers looking for a sustainable career.
Calling all aqua men, aqua women, and aqua people. So,
yes,
I think that's a great way to spin that, Scott. Career opportunities abound. Mm-hmm. Also, in our original episode, we mentioned that fixing our water infrastructure will take $1 trillion over 25 years. Unfortunately, that seems like a lowball estimate now, given some of the numbers that we are now hearing. So ASCE, the organization we referenced earlier, in their 2020 economic study called, quote, "The Economic Benefits of Investing in Water Infrastructure, How a Failure to Act Would Affect the U.S. Economic Recovery," found that over 20 years, the cumulative water and wastewater capital investment need will soar to $3.27 trillion. And the cumulative capital investment gap, which is essentially what's needed to be invested versus what's actually invested, will total $2.2 trillion, or nearly $6,000 for every adult and child expected to be living in the U.S. in 2039. So this is not, Scott, what we would call a small problem.
I would feel bad asking for the 12-year-old in 2039 to hand over their $6,000.
Look, we know you've been selling enough lemonade to cover this, so we need it by the end of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, the cost to comply with the EPA's 2019 lead and copper rule is estimated to be between $130 million and $286 million. So all of these costs that are racking up on our aging water infrastructure system.
Seriously. But the report card does note some progress, Jay. So it's estimated that more than 12,000 miles of water pipes were planned to be replaced by drinking water utilities across the country in the year 2020 alone. So 12,000 miles replaced. Although this may seem like a lot, it's actually pretty small compared to the couple million miles we talked about earlier in the whole system. Now, in 2019, about a third of all utilities had a robust asset management program. So this is another note of progress. And that asset management program was in place to help prioritize their capital and operations and maintenance investments. And a third is an increase from the 20% that was in 2016. So the utilities are getting better at managing their assets and thinking about what should we prioritize.
Right. Another sign of improvement by water utilities, Scott,
Yeah.
is that they are improving their resilience by developing and updating risk assessments and emergency response plans, as well as deploying innovative water technologies like sensors and smart water quality monitoring. So, this trend of increasing water tech makes sense considering that the America's Water Infrastructure Act of 2018 required community water systems serving more than 3,300 people to develop or update risk assessments and emergency response plans, called ERPs. The law set deadlines all before December of 2021, by which water systems must complete and submit the risk assessment and ERP to the EPA. In 2019, the number of public water systems with health-based violations was 15% lower than in 2017, and public water systems that were returned to Safe Drinking Water Act compliance increased nearly 7% compared to 2017. So again, some good positive signs there.
Yeah, so they're getting better at managing their risk, and we're seeing some results, like better quality water.
Wonderful.
Okay, so recent water infrastructure news, Jay. Let's talk about that. We've got the big infrastructure bill, the drought. Let's first talk infrastructure. So right now, under consideration is this bipartisan $1 trillion so-called hard infrastructure bill in the United States. It looks likely to pass. As the White House press release touts regarding the bill, it, quote, makes the largest investment in clean drinking water and wastewater infrastructure in American history, delivering clean water to millions of families, end quote. And so they are intending with this money to replace all of the nation's lead pipes and service lines, and it's going to invest all over the country, seeking to make inroads with the up to 10 million American households and 400,000 schools and childcare centers that lack safe drinking water, which, Jay, by itself is like a very disturbing stat.
Absolutely.
So what kind of pipe could be replacement for the lead pipes that we're talking about? Well, legacy materials for water pipes include ductile iron, steel, and concrete. Newer materials include pre-stressed concrete and certain kinds of plastic. Now, the plastic can be cheaper to buy and easier to install, but it doesn't last as long, and there is some research showing that there can be harmful leaching of chemicals from these plastic pipes.
Pre-stressed concrete, it makes me think that post-stressed concrete needs like a breather. A drink and put its feet up.
And it's also like, you know that steel is going to get stressed at some point.
I know.
You're like, you're just right before the stress.
Yeah. Enjoy it while it lasts. Pre-stressed concrete. All right. So in other news, unfortunately not great news, the current drought here in the U.S. is causing issues for drinking water, farmers, and many others like real estate developers. For the first time ever, the U.S. government declared a shortage on the Colorado River. 40 million people rely on this river for their drinking water. That's a big deal. It's really then no wonder that NPR had a story in June 2021 on Fountain, Colorado, which is just south of Colorado Springs, pretty close to me, Scott.
So you've heard of it, Jay?
Oh, yeah. You know, it's funny. Before we were blessed with Judy, we were looking at a potential pup from Fountain, Colorado. Otherwise, I don't know if I can tell you where it was on a map. But it's not far from here, which makes this stat really hit home. Yeah. In this town, the city told developers that they effectively couldn't build there because the town did not have water available to provide drinking water to new homes. Of course, we should also note that, like the rest of the world, whether things are getting wetter or drier depends on where you live. So, for example, the New York Times had a recent article showing the wetter east and drier west divide here in the United States, just to keep that in mind.
Yeah, so we've got a divide there in terms of water. Let's also talk about another divide here, Jay, a potential one, water equity. So this is something, Jay, we kind of, this is ignorant or an error, a lot of things here that we didn't include this in our original episode. So let's talk about it now. So water equity, as defined by the U.S. Water Alliance, is present when all communities, and this is 4 elements they've laid out, is when all communities have access to safe, clean, and affordable drinking water and wastewater services, are resilient in the face of floods, drought, and other climate risks, have a role in decision-making processes related to water management in their communities, and 4th, share in the economic, social, and environmental benefits of water systems. So those are the 4 elements that the U.S. Water Alliance has put together for water equity.
Right, and I think they sound great, Scott, but they are far from equally distributed, right? So we've been learning about how the history in the U.S. of redlining and other practices that led to the segregated communities we still have in too many places today also led to a lack of water equity. There's much more to what led to segregation in housing, but one primary driver was the Federal Housing Administration only guaranteeing loans to white Americans. As residential segregation increased, municipalities could more easily exclude communities of color from water and sewer services through a practice known as, quote, underbounding, whereby municipalities selectively annexed white neighborhoods into the town's official boundaries while ignoring African American neighborhoods. So, for example, in the 1960s, Roanoke, Virginia did not extend water and sanitation lines to nearby predominantly African American town of Hollins.
Jay, I'm actually reading a book right now called The Color of Law. Have you heard of that?
I haven't, no.
So the book, what it does is it's trying to show that through practices like redlining, it hasn't talked about underbounding yet, but that there were these practices by federal, state, local governments that were making it impossible for black people to live in certain communities, be it through the racial covenants or through making it so you had to jump through so many hoops that people who wanted to have integrated developments couldn't do it because the cost became crazy. And it just is obscene thinking about that it wasn't just these people that were racist and making it so black people didn't want to live there. It was literally the institutions that we relied on to be our government made it so that the segregation happened in housing. And this is like not that long ago. This is like the 50s, 60s.
Yeah. I mean, you describe that and I just find myself like centering on that term of structural racism, right? Where it's like, totally. We read in White Fragility where it's like, okay, whether you are racist or not, that's one thing. But the fact that we live in a society that's been built upon this is something else entirely. And yeah, I think what you're saying really kind of points to that directly. Yeah.
So, all right. So I recommend that book to folks that are looking for another thing to read to really understand the history of our country. So let's get back to this, Jay. So there are communities across the U.S. that still do not have access to drinking water or wastewater services because of the intersecting forces of structural racism, poverty, and inequitable access to subsidies. So, for example, an estimated 30 to 40% of the Navajo Nation does not have access to drinking water within their homes. The lack of access to running water, a necessity during a pandemic to disinfect and clean surfaces, contributed to the high infection rates per capita in the Navajo Nation compared to other states. And Jay, I think we could do a whole show on water equity. Maybe we should at some point. We're leaving a lot out here. We're going to link to a great report titled Water Affordability and Equity, Reimagining Water Services. It's a 2020 report from the Aspen Institute and Duke University's Nicholas Institute. That's where we got the above information. There's so much more there. We encourage you to check it out.
Definers, on top of all that, our original episode was very US-centric, so we did want to include a little bit more on the global water infrastructure situation and global news. Sorry, bad news. According to a 2017 study, unsafe water sources are responsible for 1.2 million deaths each year. That's 2.2% of all deaths globally. On top of that, 1 in 4 people do not have access to safe drinking water. And so far, we're pretty far from the UN Sustainable Development Goal to achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all by the year 2030. In fact, global estimates to reach this goal range from $6.7 trillion by 2030 to $22.6 trillion by 2050. So unfortunately, these water infrastructure woes are not limited here to the U.S.
Just more and more trillions here, Jay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So, not the good kind of trillions here.
No, and we're not getting enough investment in it. Of the hundreds of billions in climate finance devoted to developing countries in recent years, the projects involving water made up less than 1% of them in 2016. And this is crazy because treating wastewater can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and improving water access helps along environmental, social, and economic fronts. For those interested in donating to those working on water scarcity globally, we do have a link in our show notes to DonorBox's top 10 nonprofits fighting the global water crisis.
Also, back in 2017, in our original episode, we had a section on entrepreneurs and water tech. Here are some more that we recently read about. So, this area of smart sensors is seeing a lot of new entrants. Quote, smart systems can monitor water digitally and remotely, immediately detecting issues like shortages, leaks, and contaminants. One company offering this tech is Ketos, Ketos. It's among the few that can remotely detect heavy metals like arsenic and lead. It can also analyze data to predict major shortages and contamination before they happen.
Right, so this tech, more and more people are wanting it. The global smart water management market size is expected to grow from $11.7 billion in 2019 to an estimated $21.4 billion by 2024. And so let's talk a little bit about the data that water utilities are collecting. There is a 2021 report titled The Digital Capabilities of U.S. Water Utilities, and it shows that data is important to water utilities, but they have a ways to go. So while this report finds 87% of water utilities gather data digitally, many report not collecting information available to them, that their data is not centralized, and other issues. For example, 80% of respondents said data quality and quantity are a concern. Further, nearly as many are concerned about the lack of internal staff with the necessary digital skills, 74% said that's an issue, and resistance to change, 70%. So hopefully more digital solutions serve the sector, and there's funding to properly install and service it. And Jay, this goes back to the turnover and the retirements in this sector. If you know digital, man, you're going to be in demand. You're going to have a job for sure, I would think.
And I'm saying if you're already listening to a podcast at this point, chances are you're digitally savvy, so go for apply for those jobs. Okay, so mobile water treatment is a growing area since this approach can reach remote areas and avoid the need to build out extensive water infrastructure. This one's super interesting. One company offering innovative technology in this space is Off-Grid Box. It's a 2 by 2 by 2 meter solar-powered shipping container that provides clean energy as well as clean water. It has a water collection system to capture rain, and then some of the energy is used to power a built-in water treatment system. It can be set up in just 4 hours. Scott, that's like barely 4 podcast episodes of ours. It's been installed in 16 countries, mostly in Tanzania and Rwanda, and about 1,500 people can be served by a single unit. And Scott, when we zoom out and think about what the impact this could have, it's pretty huge. We found a stat that said that women and girls worldwide spend 200 million hours every day collecting water. So if we're able to scale mobile water treatment, that could really change some lives, right?
Right. And the nice thing is that Off-Grid Box is not the only player in this. We found another company called Source Global. They sell something called hydro panels that uses the sun to power the unit, and it utilizes the process of passive condensation to extract water molecules from the air to generate pure drinking water. And in this way, it turns the moisture in the air into drinking water. Pretty nifty.
Quite nifty.
Thank you, Jay. So, lastly, listeners, we want to tell you about Will Sarni. Give a little update on him. We already mentioned that we think this guy's rocks. But he's still the founder and CEO of the Water Foundry. And in 2021, he became the founder and general partner in the Colorado River Basin Fund. This is a private equity fund that seeks to invest in innovative water technologies addressing water scarcity and quality issues in the basin. It's the first place-based, water-focused investment fund in the United States. Pretty cool.
Along with Tom Freyberg, Will also hosts a podcast called The Stream.
It's a great name.
It started in April 2020, and they are now in the midst of season 3. On the podcast, they have unscripted conversations with guests who reject the status quo with a bias for action in the world of water and beyond. We encourage you guys to go check it out.
All right, Jay, that does it for our updated intro. Let's thank some people, huh?
Let's do it. Starts off.
Okay, so first, let's thank Richard Starkey. He's a longtime listener. He's a grad student at Villanova University in their Water Resources and Environmental Engineering program. Jay, he wrote us one of the nicest emails from a listener that I don't know if they may have ever received. And we were doing this episode, and we were like, wait, you're a master's student in water resources. Read these intro notes. What did we miss? So he helped us identify a couple holes, and we appreciate your time, Richard, and for listening.
Awesome. We would also like to thank for this update Adrienne Breen, Scott's mom, aka the luckiest mom in the world, and I love it when we get to thank her in these episodes.
Yeah, she found some good new technology and some of the stats, the global stats, so it was very useful.
Absolutely. We also like to thank Keaton Butler for editing this whole puppy together, and of course, thanking Potions and Square Peg Round Hole for the tunes we play in this episode.
All right, Jay, I was very excited when you told me that someone did post a review.
Oh yeah, this was like Christmas come early, Scott.
Yes, but we only got one review, so we're definitely reading it. So in this next month, if you're listening to this and you haven't posted a review for our podcast on Apple Podcasts, do so. We'll probably read it and say your name.
Do it.
All right, so we've got one here from Toriels, August 27th, 2021. The title of this is Change My Outlook on Everything. Very promising, Jay, that title. All right. I started listening to this podcast 3 years ago when I used to have a longer commute to work. Coincidentally, the first episode was on e-bikes, so I was pretty excited when my place of work started carrying them. I geek out when I see things like juice box in people's homes after hearing about it in the podcast. Not to mention, it's been great hearing updates from previous episodes. Jay, she's going to like this.
Oh, yeah.
Whoever this is.
Oh, yeah.
I've always had an interest in environmentalism, but my field of study had nothing to do with this field. Listeners don't need a degree in environmentalism to appreciate this podcast. Considering how sustainability affects us all, this podcast is definitely for everyone. I've sent episodes like the ones on eco-anxiety, racism, and the environment, and e-bikes to everyone from friends to even my eyelash extension tech. I love it. The party facts are the tidbits my neurodiverse brain is already full of, so I love this format. While the climate crisis makes us all feel powerless, it's a relief to listen to this podcast and be reminded that people are actively combating it, or at least care to be informed. Great work, Scott and Jay. Toriels.
My goodness.
Jay, I think if we don't get a review, let's just read this one again. This is great. I'm serious.
Like, Scott, you're reading this something, and I don't think I could have written anything more flattering
oh my God.
than this.
Toriels.
So
Toriels, email us. And we should say, first of all, everyone should email us. Any feedback, good or bad. We want to hear from you. Hosts, HOSTS, at sustainabilitydefined.com. But Toriels, email us. We want to thank you, like, even more than just saying your name, if that's your name, on the podcast. So, all right. Good stuff. This is a good way to end it, Jay. I think that about does it for the update, but please stick around for the original episode, which still has a lot of good info. You all stay sustainable out there. I'm Scott Breen.
And I'm Jay Siegel. We'll see you next time. All right, so Scott, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about everyone's favorite topic, Jay, water infrastructure.
Water infrastructure. I'm telling people that we're covering this topic on this next episode, and everyone's like, oh, okay. But we're going to make this interesting and exciting, and here we go.
Okay.
Let's break down what this intro is going to cover. We're first going to tell you why water infrastructure is important. We're going to tell you how expansive our water infrastructure system currently is. Then we'll branch into the current state of our water infrastructure. Spoiler alert, it's not so great. We'll move into how much it will cost to fix said water infrastructure. Spoiler alert, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And then we'll branch into the latest and greatest tech to reduce our water use, which could put less strain on this infrastructure.
Okay, so first thing Jay mentioned, why is this important? It's important for a number of reasons. Water infrastructure is critical to so many things that we do. It takes away rainwater. It takes away wastewater from our homes. Wastewater, a.k.a. poopy and pee-pee water.
We're going to be coming back to this topic, so Scott, stay with us.
I think I've talked about my use of the smiley poop emoji
so many times.
It gets across so many things. It's very apt. Okay, and it also gives us safe, hopefully, drinking water, and also, in case a fire happens, there's water.
Right.
Okay, so there are different types of water treatment providers. Some of you might have a not-for-profit community water system. Some of you may have a small system that only serves a couple thousand people. But most of you, 3/4 of Americans, get their water from a publicly owned treatment work. That basically means that you've got a water treatment and supply company that is owned by a government agency, normally a local municipality. And so if 3/4 of you are getting water from a POTW and the public-owned treatment work doesn't have the greatest water infrastructure, that means many of you could be impacted by inefficient or harmful water that's delivered to you.
Right. And I think, Scott, you mentioned in our upcoming interview with Will that this is something that we just take for granted. You know, we just like turn on our faucet, like go to fill up our water glass, and we assume that the water's good. But,
we should have a little, you should do a little jig every time that water comes out.
It's a small miracle.
Yeah.
Really. But if you're still doubtful as to why you should care about this, consider a combined sewer overflow infrastructure system, which is where rainwater and wastewater are all channeled into a single pipe. You'll find this in older cities with older infrastructure where when there is too much water in the system due to something like a heavy rain and the water treatment plant can't keep up with all the water that should have been handled by the infrastructure, the water is sent directly into waterways untreated to avoid backups into our homes. So I'm hoping that visual is as impactful for you as it is for me, because that kind of water backing up into your home is something that I don't think anyone wants.
Yeah, we really got to solve that problem because a lot of wastewater goes into waterways through that. DC is spending billions of dollars to build these big tunnels that'll just hold the water till the wastewater treatment's ready. But Jay, one of these days I'll have to take you to these CSO points. There's signs that say, hey, in a big rainstorm, there's going to be poop and pee-pee water coming out here.
That's not like a date proposition. Jay, I'm gonna take you to these CSO points, like these like romantic overlooks,
if people want to know where they are, that is a great, we just had dinner, now I'm going to show you this thing and show off my intelligence. Look at what I know about the city.
Oh man, if you look close enough, poo-poo and pee-pee water come right out of here.
Okay, so how expansive is our water infrastructure? In addition to the miles of sewer pipes that take the water away from our homes, the U.S. has 1.2 million miles of water mains that are taking water to our homes. In just those water mains, the U.S. has 1.2 million miles of them. That's 26 miles of water mains for every mile of interstate highway.
It blows your mind.
Blows my mind.
Right?
That should be the party fact at the end of the episode, but we're doing it now. We're doing it live, Jay.
We're doing it live. Let me branch quickly into the current state of our water infrastructure since Scott, you just told us exactly how much there is. The pipes that make up this infrastructure can range anywhere from 15 to 100 years old, depending on their conditions, although some older northeastern cities operate with pipes that are 200 years old.
If these pipes could talk, Jay.
Man, we'd have so much to learn. And the issue with these old pipes is that they pose problems through inefficiencies, where you have an estimated 240,000 water main breaks per year in the U.S., which comes out to about 650 per day. You can also think about that as every mile of water pipe suffers a break on average every 6 years.
Jake, this is crazy. U.S. water utilities lose 1 out of every 7 gallons of drinking water they supply before it arrives to a customer. 1 out of every 7, they're just losing.
And the direct cost of these leaks is about $2.6 billion a year, which not only impacts residents, but also businesses. The cumulative cost to households from degrading water infrastructure will be about $60 billion from 2013 through 2020. And the cost of businesses will be well more than double that at almost $150 billion.
Okay, so you've got huge costs, and also the pipes aren't doing what they're meant to do in the sense that a lot of untreated water ends up in our waterways. We're talking 900 billion gallons of untreated sewage and wastewater entering U.S. waterways each year. This is crazy. 900 billion gallons of water. We're talking 650 breaks per day, and many, many billions of dollars in cost to residential customers and businesses.
Yeah.
No one's talking about it.
Those aren't statistics that'll help you sleep at night. And I think no one's talking about it because you can't see it. It's underground.
Right. Okay, so Jay, how much is this going to cost to fix?
Short answer, Scott, at least $1 trillion over the next 25 years, according to the American Water Works.
Did I just see a Dr. Evil pinky, Jay?
Yeah, that's right.
$1 trillion.
Yeah, it's been a while. He's been gone for about 10 episodes, but he's back.
Yeah. I don't think we've done $1 trillion problem.
I think we might have.
Maybe. I probably
don't underestimate the issues that we're trying to discuss here.
Okay, and this $1 trillion, it's just for drinking water pipes. I'm not talking sewer lines or stormwater or the wastewater treatment plants themselves.
Right, and replacing these pipes accounts for about 54% of the national total of that $1 trillion. With the remaining, the 46%, attributable just to population growth and migration over that period. It's also expected that more than 56 million new users will be connected to centralized treatment systems over the next 2 decades, which translates to about a 23% increase in demand, which is a ton.
Right. Well, Jay, this is why I'm not going to have any kids. I don't want to add any users to the water system.
Scott, I'm telling you, your abstinence will save the world.
Yeah. Okay. So the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies says that we are in the replacement era, which doesn't... I tried, Jay, but it doesn't sound very sexy, does it?
It's like the Jurassic era, the Chris... I don't know the rest of my eras, but this one isn't as cool.
Yeah, I don't think the president's going to be giving a speech on, my fellow Americans, we are in the replacement era. Pay your taxes.
No, unless we're talking coal jobs.
Ooh. Okay. Stay away from that, Jay. Stay away. Okay, so... But by postponing the replacement era, by letting these things degrade more and more, it becomes more costly, so we shouldn't kick the can down the road.
Right. And it's important for everyone to note that 95% of spending on water infrastructure is made at the local level. However, the federal government does expend some funds on water infrastructure, mainly through vehicles called the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund.
Yeah, these funds are pretty cool. What happens is EPA puts money into these state-run funds. States match that money with a 20% match. It's then loaned out for clean water projects or drinking water projects. And as the people that get the money pay it back, it's then loaned out again. That's why they call it a revolving fund. These two funds, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, have provided many billions of dollars in funding and have contributed to thousands of projects.
Right. So basically fixing our water system is not going to be an easy or cheap thing to do. And it's, again, $1 trillion problem that no one's talking about, except for us, Scott.
That's right, Jay. We're on the cutting edge.
That's why you come here. Speaking of cutting edge, Scott, talk to us about the latest and greatest tech that is out there that could help us reduce our water use and put less strain on our water infrastructure.
Okay. So there's one company called Apana, which is saying, let's apply the Internet of Things, think like wearables, these devices that talk to each other, and analytics to help companies plug leaks so that they control their water like they control their inventory. So Apana has the system that scans the water infrastructure to detect mechanical breakdowns and then give directions to employees on how to fix those problems before they accumulate. They claim that this can help companies return 18 to 25% of their water and sewer costs to their bottom line, and brand name companies are buying in. Costco is their biggest customer. They reduced their water system by 22%, which makes sense because they're all about doing things in bulk.
But
Thank you. I'll be here for the rest of the podcast.
All right. We've also got a group called Aqua Fresco, which is doing something that's going to impact your laundry. They've created a water top recycling system that allows you to use the same batch of water and detergent for 6 months of laundry. Their technology removes the organic waste, but not the detergent from the water. And they claim that that their technology can reduce 95% of water and detergent use in washer machines. Or you could also just choose not to wash your clothes at all and save water that way.
Right. So what's one other solution, Jay?
We could look into recycled water.
Which is like toilet to tap. Like
right.
The water you flush down, they clean it, they send it right back to you, which is what we don't do now. Once they clean it, they just send it back to the waterway.
Right. And in the U.S., we only recycle about 8% of our municipal water. Singapore, for reference, recycles about 30%, and Israel recycles about 70%. So, this is also a huge area we could explore.
Yeah, and I'm glad we just touched on what some other countries do. Admittedly, basically everything we've talked about up until now has been domestic U.S. stuff. This is a major issue globally, and it's even worse outside the U.S. So more than 80% of wastewater worldwide is released without treatment, contaminating rivers and lakes and other waterways. The result is that every 90 seconds, a child dies from water-related diseases. And it's a stunning statistic.
It is.
On average, low-income countries treat only 8% of domestic and industrial wastewater. That's in contrast to high-income countries that treat maybe like 70%.
Yeah, and we'll put that in context and say that the total cost to water utilities that's driven by lost water worldwide can be estimated around $140 billion per year, with a third of it occurring in the developing world. And in these developing countries, the amount of water lost through leakage is enough to serve nearly 200 million people.
Right. So these issues of direct costs and water leakage and discharging water before it's treated, these issues are magnified on the global scale. And I wish we had more time to talk about that issue too.
Yeah, but let's segue into our interview. So Scott, tell us about who we're speaking with momentarily.
Okay, so Will Sarni is the founder and principal of Water Foundry LLC, where he helps companies develop and implement corporate-wide water strategies. So a lot of his work is on the corporate side, but we actually found him looking at a report that he worked on with Deloitte, looking at water infrastructure. And this guy, I don't know what he's drinking. I guess it's water, but he is so prolific and is just churning out so much content that a lot of the stuff we just talked about came from his writings. And he's also tweeting like nonstop. This guy's Twitter is amazing.
It's almost like he's drinking that special water that Adam Sandler had in The Waterboy, Like it's like knocked out
some high quality H2O.
That's exactly right. So let's find out from Will. First off, more about this water issue, and then maybe where we can secure some of that water for ourselves. Here we go. All right, Scott. So we are here with the pleasure of speaking with Will Sarni, who is our expert in all things water for this episode. We're excited to talk to him about kind of the state of the U.S. water infrastructure and maybe look to the future as far as what kinds of promising tech there might be and solutions. So, Will, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here, talking about my almost favorite topic. So, yeah, I'm excited.
Wait, what rivals water?
Oh, all sorts of things. That's a longer podcast, but, let's stick with water or anything made from water.
Okay, well, let me take a sip of my tap water real quick.
All right, good.
All right, there it is. So our first question for you is, what got you interested in sustainability, and then what got you interested in like water strategy and technology more specifically? So just some more background on you. How'd you get to what you're doing now?
Yeah, how did I get hooked? So that's a great question. I grew up in New York City. I was a surfer, believe it or not, on Long Island.
The waves of the Hudson River.
No, come on. Long Island has great beaches, guys. So I got hooked on oceanography. I went to college. I thought I wanted to go into oceanography, and it turned out that I actually landed work with a groundwater consulting firm on Long Island when I was in graduate school. And it was a small boutique groundwater consulting firm started by a few U.S. Geological Survey guys. And that was it. I was kind of off to the races and fascinated by all the public health issues associated with groundwater and just the technical complexity of groundwater.
See, now I thought you were going to say that you had some bagels in New York City and someone told you it's the water that makes it taste so good, and then you were hooked.
Well, that too. Yeah, that's the follow-up question. Well, of course, fine food comes from fine water, and fine alcoholic beverages come from fine water. But, really for me, I was always interested in water. I thought it was going to be salt water. It turned out it was actually groundwater. And have been at it for a very long period of time. And I find that I always learn something new every day, which is really exciting. So,
Will, let me ask you a question about your experiences growing up in New York and then where you currently are based in Denver. And I'm curious, myself growing up in Denver, about your experience relative to water in both places. So, do you think, and I've kind of grown up with this perception that, there is kind of this drought. And so water scarcity is something that the folks in Denver are kind of, if not well-versed, and at least aware of. Do you find that people are kind of more attuned to this issue out in Denver and out west relative to New York? Or is this an issue that everyone is starting to take seriously?
Yeah, I think there's, and you touch on a really important point. I think there really is a difference. I mean, growing up in New York, it was really about an abundance of water and the quality of water. So, of course, still being a raging New Yorker, we're incredibly proud of the quality and taste of the water, and the fact that the city planned really well in terms of protecting watersheds that supply the city. So it was really a very different view of a water, more from a quality, taste perspective and history. Coming out west, I moved from New York City to New Mexico and then Houston and then to Denver. And there really is a very different view. It is about, how do you not just live, but thrive in a arid environment, for the most part.
Sure.
And Western water law is fundamentally different than it is back east.
Mm-hmm.
So, that really was an adjustment, but it was a really healthy adjustment for me, really adapting to not the drought, but water scarcity and everything that goes with it, and Western water law, and, how public policy is, potentially changing over time. So, yeah, a big change, different point of view, but a really healthy one.
Okay, so my law and policy spider sense was tingling there when you were talking about different law in the East and the West, and that could be another podcast, I know. But we want to ask you about water infrastructure and how U.S. policy has guided that. And we talked at the top of the show about the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and the Drink Water State Revolving Fund, and we've seen that Trump's so-called skinny budget maintains that funding, maybe cutting water infrastructure programs in other places. Are you hopeful that in the coming years, be it from the federal government or another level, that we're going to start to see pipes getting replaced and water infrastructure being funded?
Boy, great question. I'm not terribly hopeful that the public sector will step up to deal with these infrastructure issues. I actually have a lot more confidence in the private sector and entrepreneurs to address some of these issues. And, I think someone just needs to look at what happened at Flint. This was not technology failure. This was really a public policy governance failure. So how do entrepreneurs and technology startups provide solutions that are not dependent upon public policy regulations and funding? So I think that's sort of an interesting play in all of this. I mean, if we wait for the public sector to find adequate funding and support initiatives, it might take a long time.
So I think that's a really interesting question, and I'm wondering if the rise, if we can call it that, of green bonds might be a type of financing tool that could do that. Is that something you see?
I do. I think, green infrastructure bonds, green infrastructure as opposed to gray infrastructure is an interesting play. You're seeing some leading water utility districts start to focus on that and make investments. And
can you say what gray versus green infrastructure is? Some people might not know.
Yeah, so gray is everything that we know right now, which is, the built environment, centralized wastewater treatment systems, water treatment systems, and, all the plumbing associated with that. And green infrastructure is really taking a different view. It's using natural systems for water treatment, like, constructed wetlands, for example, to treat water as opposed to a heavy dose of chemicals and high energy use. So, I think DC Water is an interesting example of a very progressive U.S. water utility that floated a 100-year, a century bond, basically, and invested in a green bond. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of momentum there and interest as an alternative to, essentially 20th century infrastructure and thinking.
Right. So just to clarify, so green infrastructure is more talking about using almost natural properties and processes, right, mimicking those in a sense to clean the water. Green bonds are where a municipality and corporations and such can issue them too, but municipalities or whatever can issue them and say, hey, this bond that I'm issuing, it's going to be used for this so-called green purpose like water treatment. So right, just want to clarify that. And right, I think part of what might lead to municipalities issuing these sort of green bonds is if people, write to them or sort of demand this sort of action. And I'm wondering, I was joking that I'm drinking my tap water right now. It was so easy. I turn on my tap. I never question that there's going to be clean water coming out of there. And I feel like for most Americans, I know not every American, but most American, that is the case. So without, Flint obviously is an example, but without people really feeling it, are they not going to demand action and be galvanized, and then that's going to lead to more kicking the can down the road of not fixing our critical water infrastructure?
Well, as we know, we're really good about kicking the can down the road. Yeah, I mean, look at U.S. infrastructure in general and water in particular. To upgrade existing U.S. water infrastructure is a significant long-term investment. And I think there's some really important choices that have to be made, which is, do you spend the dollars that are estimated to replace 20th century infrastructure, or do you take fewer dollars and think about 21st century infrastructure, which might be green infrastructure? It might be off-grid, decentralized, and distributed infrastructure solutions, as opposed to building, what we built last century, which, served us well. I mean, to your point, you turn on the tap, and with a very high level of confidence, that you're going to have safe drinking water and you won't get ill. But dollars are scarce, and fortunately, technology has advanced to the point where we have a broader menu of options.
So when you say a decentralized system, do you imagine that everybody's going to have a filtration system of some sort in their homes, and it's going to be that decentralized?
It could be, and why not? So, I mean, think about it now. What we do is we treat water to primary drinking water standards. We ship it to you. You flush your toilets with it. You water your lawn. You wash your car with it. You take a shower with it. You do whatever. Imagine a different system where a utility might distribute water to you that is not primary drinking water standards, but you would treat water based on, your need in your neighborhood, in your home, whatever it may be. And, I think that's really kind of where we're headed.
Right. Like my bathroom water does not need to be that great.
Well, and I think it's serious because, it's funny we're talking about this, Will, because you're describing this. And this was, I think, quite honestly, the first question that I started to think about as far as when I was starting to get into this environmental stuff. A professor was saying, do we really need drinking water in our toilets? And it's like, well, you think about it, definitely not, but that definitely has these larger implications for what the actual water infrastructure looks like behind it.
My poop does not need to go in clean water. It doesn't.
Yeah, but
Thanks, God.
Just in case anyone was wondering.
but wait, your cat might enjoy, still potable toilet.
See, Will's such a good guy. He's looking out for the cats.
I'm looking out for the cats. To me, this is really a radical rethink of how we value water, how we manage water, and what technologies are suddenly available to us that were really not available just a short time ago. And, part of this point of view came out of an experience I had last year where I was working with XPRIZE and leading a team to develop a prize concept for universal access to safe drinking water. And it really was kind of a clean sheet of paper. How do you ensure that everyone has access to safe drinking water and, in fact, knows that it is safe to drink? And where we landed was, essentially in-home water treatment and real-time water quality monitoring. I think is a great prize concept. Could you mobilize people to come up with a solution for that? Yeah, I absolutely believe it.
Excellent. So let's pivot now from the private side, which we kind of understand, has seen better days, to the private side, which is where we know you're also quite involved. Really helping companies understand their own water strategies and what to do with those. So from a high level, from our perspective, from our listeners' perspectives, can you tell us what the steps are that you help private companies address in their own water issues? What do those strategies look like?
Sure. So the bulk of my work is in the private sector. So working with either U.S. or non-U.S. multinationals on quantifying water risks and translating that into business value at risk. So assigning a monetary value to it, either current and projected. And what that means is that these companies, leading companies, look at physical risk. Do I have enough water when and where I need it of the right quality? Regulatory risk, what are the regulations right now? What might they be going forward? How might that impact my business? What would be the cost? And, what I think is arguably one of the most important is reputational risk. So how do stakeholders view how I am managing water in general and potentially their water in particular? So, leading companies look at those three dimensions. They integrate that into their business growth strategy. They quantify value at risk, and they start making investments accordingly. So, in a lot of ways, they have a closer connection to the value of water than the public sector. And I think there's a lot of interesting initiatives in the private sector.
Yeah, and so you're talking about how they're really considering the risk that comes with not having water access. Have you seen examples where this issue that we were talking about on the public side of not having the finances to make it happen, have you seen any companies say, you know what, I just invested millions into this factory and I need to have good water supply. So you know what, local municipality, I'm going to give you a matching money, meet me halfway. Have you seen that where they're actually funding local water treatment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So is there direct private investment in public infrastructure driven by a company's acute need to continue to operate and grow? I haven't seen it. I've had several discussions on this topic, but that's not to say it hasn't happened.
We're ahead of the curve on this podcast, Will.
So
that's how we operate.
So you actually have examples of where this has happened?
No.
We'll get back to you.
Maybe we'll put it into the outro if we can find some.
I love it. I actually had a conversation with a company on this very topic, and they framed water as water for prosperity. And they were really thinking about, should we invest in local infrastructure for the benefit of the community in which we're operating in, and our employees and customers, And, it would also give us the ability to run our operation without disruption. So, that could be where we're headed. Sort of blurring the boundaries between the public and private sector, I think is an important and real trend.
Well, and let's pick up there as we're starting to look forward. You being in the industry and having kind of your finger on the pulse on what's going on with water and trends, do you see any promising innovations going on that you think have a legitimate chance to improve things?
Yeah, and we did read your article in Green Biz on how entrepreneurs can help the quest for safe drinking water, and you give the example of zero mass water. So I don't know if you want to throw that in there.
Sure. So of course, the short answer is yes. I think there's really exciting opportunities on the technology side. Zero mass water is really interesting for me. It is a solar-powered air moisture capture technology. So it basically democratizes access to safe drinking water. It gives you the ability to have a panel or two on your home and ensure that you have uninterrupted access to safe drinking water. So, essentially off-grid. And that's important in emerging economies. So, places like, Latin America and Mexico, but also, places like the American West. So, that technology is a great example of innovation at the energy-water nexus, and also a great example of someone who came from outside the water sector. Not a water person, someone who just looked at the issue and said, well, I can take my material science background and apply it to a wicked problem in water. So, there are examples like that. I think there are a lot of exciting things going on in the world of data acquisition and analytics right now that apply to the utility sector. So, asset management, predictive analytics, and so on.
Well, and so, Will, we're over here still trying to visualize what this zero mass water looks like. It sounds super cool, but describe it to us. So it sounds like it's a solar panel that you kind of can create anywhere that's able to basically condense. Is it moisture in the air into drinking water?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So air has moisture to varying degrees. Where are you guys in the
we
American?
have moisture, Will.
Yeah,
So
you're in the swamp of the District of Columbia.
Oh, well, there we go. So you have no shortage of air moisture, but in places like the Middle East or Mexico, there is some air moisture, and what the technology does is concentrate the moisture in the air. It collects it, and it generates several liters per day of safe drinking water. And, that's an exhaustible supply of water.
Okay, so a lot of our listeners also might have heard about this whole recycling water approach. A lot of people put the shorthand on it of toilet to tap. And do you think that is part of the solution? Do you think people are going to be able to get over that concern? Like, I'm drinking poop water. Great.
I don't know. How do you guys, are you over it? Or you're still, shocked and appalled?
I'd have no problem with it as long as it came out clean.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, what do I think the water that I'm getting out of the tap right now, that it was clean? It was dirty at some point. What's the difference?
So why don't you show me the glass of water that you've got in your hand?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, cool.
It's brown, but it's fine.
Hey, look, toilet to tap is a very poor branding exercise. Mm-hmm. If you look at Singapore, they call it new water, and they put it in cute bottles. So I think they've done an infinitely better job. The reality is we're downstream from everybody. So, we're always treating water, discharging water, and, direct potable or indirect potable reuse is, our new reality, essentially. It's, we're going to treat water, we're going to use it for potable purposes or none.
So how about for our listeners and even Scott and myself included, that want to check now after knowing that Scott's drinking brown water here.
I'm appalled.
Believe me, I am too.
Gets me going. That's how I prep for all interviews.
So if we would like to check on, the quality of our local water infrastructure, or even start to engage, hopefully, our representatives to help address this issue, how would you recommend that we go about doing that?
Sure. I would reach out to your utilities. They're required to test and report water quality on an annual basis, I believe, to EPA. But, engaging them on, certainly water quality issues, infrastructure issues, how bad is the aging infrastructure issue, what are required for upgrades. I know that you're in a wet part of the world, water abundant part, but, if you move out west again, and really asking, what does the supply demand scenario look like? And, how are you going to manage that to support economic development, business growth, and social well-being? So, being active and reaching out is a good way to start.
So let's go to our last question. We ask it of every guest. So, Will, imagine that we are at a very fancy party with very well-flavored water, the cucumber water. What else?
LaCroix, maybe.
Listen, LaCroix. Yeah. LaCroix is blowing up.
That's I was just listening to a podcast that was talking about it. Yeah.
Anyway, and in fact, did you listen to How I Built This, where the guy made hops flavored water?
It was the Power Rangers episode. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Anyways, keep going.
Okay. See the tech, the innovation in water.
It's so cool.
Okay, so we're at this party with all this crazy water, and we want to impress the other people at the party with some water infrastructure fact that is going to blow their mind. What do you got? What can we tell these people?
I can't believe that this podcast is going to end on a sour note, that I really don't have anything snappy, quite frankly. But of course, having said that, and managing expectations, I would probably focus on, do you know how much water it takes to make a beer? Like just embedded water in common products like food, beverages, or a computer chip, a standard computer chip. Think about that.
Well, what's the craziest one?
Yeah.
Do you have where that's always blowing you away? It takes this many gallons to make this.
Hey, yeah. So I'm always fascinated by the semiconductor manufacturing sector. They require ultra pure water, and
those snobs.
It comes in a great bottle. It's all about branding. But, I want to say I think it takes like 12 gallons of ultra pure water to make a standard chip. People. I guess my point here is that people typically think about embedded water with respect to food and beverage products. And the reality is that it takes water to manufacture automobiles, semiconductor chips, your microphone, your apparel, whatever it may be. And we don't typically think about that.
So, Will, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about, such an important but also cool issue that I'm sure there are all these really cool solutions being created around. So thank you again so much for joining us, and we wish you all the best.
Well, thanks so much. This was a pleasure. Happy to follow up if you have any other questions, and look forward to the podcast.
Well, thanks, Will. And if you come through DC, let us know. We'll get you some water. We'll chat over some tap water. Yeah.
Hey, guys! I would like a water derivative. How's that?
Oh.
I don't even know what that means. I have some homework to do.
It's either beer or vodka. So. I'll let you know. All right. Take care, guys. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Will.
All right, Scott, I'm so excited because I actually get to use a real expression to wind down this episode. Scott, the contents of this episode have run dry.
That's too bad, Jay. We should probably dig a deeper well. We can make a longer episode. We can do this.
Until next
time. Get your
time.
shovels.
Until next time.
All right, so we have a bunch of people to thank. We want to thank Max Saul, one of our research assistants who put together the first draft of the notes. Super helpful. We appreciate your help. And we also want to, of course, thank Emily Dubois for the lovely logo that we use. We also want to thank Square Peg Round Hole and Potions for our music.
That's right. And if you guys haven't already, please subscribe to our feed on iTunes where you can rate us, review us, and share us with all of your friends. If you have questions, comments, or as our website says, you're just lonely, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. And keep the
We're kind of lonely,
going.
So we'd like to hear from you. Make us feel good.
It finally comes out 21 episodes in. Guys, we are so lonely.
Jay's got a long-distance girlfriend,
Oh, man. Please write in.
All right. Jay, I think that about does it. I'm Scott Breen. You all stay sustainable out there.
And I am Jay Siegel. We will see you next time.